How much would you cover if your kid was in the bucket with you? If you had a small child, or I mean, even a teenager, and they were in the bucket with you, how much would you cover? And as I've gone around and I've started asking linemen that, the number one answer, the most common answer is, I'll cover all of it. Mm-hmm. Have you ever go to football practice and the head coach not be on the field? Started thinking back, it's like, no, they were there every practice, no matter what. They were present and they were leading things. Yeah, do that. Do that every time.
Hey, and welcome back to the Electrical Safety Podcast. I'm your host, John Travis, and today I'm going to be speaking with Brandon Wylie again. Brandon, second time coming on the show. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, it's good to be here, John. Appreciate you having me back, man. This is great.
Yeah, and I guess just something, if it is your first time listening and this is kind of some content that maybe you enjoy, then hopefully you can share the show with friends, or even hit the subscribe button there. Just try to get a few more listeners and a few more people here, and maybe some stuff on some electrical safety. So I know you a few months back you did a bit of a presentation there titled that it's a moral obligation, and obviously talking about electrical safety in the safety world. So the first question I was thinking, what kind of inspired you to frame electrical safety as a moral obligation and not just a compliance issue?
It's kind of a different way to look at it, and I'm the type person that I try to come up with analogies. I try to frame things in a way that folks can go, oh, I didn't really think of it that way. I never thought of it like that. Because you go to work, you go on a crew, you're there for 8 or 10 hours or whatever. Then you go home, and sometimes it just gets mundane. It's monotonous. It's just day in, day out. And with that comes complacency that sets in. And I've seen in my almost 28 years in this industry, I've seen a lot of change, but I've also seen some things that have kind of remained the same. And some of that is this approach to safety as you got to do this, and this, and this is the regulation, and this is what you have to follow. And then you get out on the crew, and they're looking up at this job, and they're trying to determine how they're going to change out a pole or whatever it is. And when it comes back to that regulation that's written on that piece of paper, and they go, how the hell am I going to do this and that? Mm-hmm. Well, there's ways, and you have to kind of broaden your mind. But when it boils down to it, I used to tell guys, when you're up in a bucket and you're looking at this pole, and you have your cover, and you're thinking, I don't need all this. This is way too much. How much would you cover if your kid was in the bucket with you? If you had a small child, or I mean, even a teenager, and they were in the bucket with you, how much would you cover? And as I've gone around and I've started asking linemen that, the number one answer, the most common answer is, I'll cover all of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, do that. Do that every time. And it starts to kind of register and click, like, okay, I see what you're saying. And with leadership, and kind of getting back to the moral obligation thing, when I heard someone use it this way. I played high school football, and a lot of linemen have played sports. And somebody said, "Have you ever go to football practice and the head coach not be on the field?" I started thinking back, it's like, no, they were there every practice, no matter what. They were present, and they were leading things. And that kind of spurred that thought of moral obligation, because that coach has a moral obligation for his team. Well, when you get into leadership, you start running a crew, it applies there too, but it's much more dangerous. I mean, football's a game. Now you're dealing with live electricity. So as a leader on the crew, feeling that moral obligation of, I've got to do everything in my power to keep these guys safe. And that's kind of how it all was born. It was that story about the football coach, and then I started relating it to line work and your kids, and then it just kind of grew from there.
Mm. So how much of this, like, for you, when you're talking to people, and you mentioned leadership, you mentioned the crew. For you, I guess, where do you focus the most, and are you directing the conversations more toward leadership, and that's where you see that we can make the biggest change?
Yeah, I think it starts with leadership, and it starts not only at the crew level with the guy that's there, but it's his boss, and then his boss's boss, and all the way up the chain. The most executive leader that you have, your CEO, your executive director, whoever that is, has to say, "You have my permission to work safe,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what it is. You have my permission," and that goes so far with guys because they sometimes they think, "Oh, leadership doesn't care about us. They care about is the bottom line." And it's I've been on both sides. I came up. I started as a groundman, and I was a truck driver, and I've worked all the way up into the position I have now. So I've seen both sides, and I try to relate that to guys. That no, they don't. They see you. They see you as a person. They want you to be safe. But for leadership to come out and say, "Hey, you've got my permission to be safe. If it's not safe, don't do it. You don't have to do this." And then it goes down the line to finally you get to the leadership on the crew. And when a lineman or an apprentice is about to do something unsafe, they go, "Stop. We're not taking the shortcut. We're going to do this the right way."
Mm-hmm. Have you had any? I guess, have you encountered any, like, resistance to this idea or a little bit of pushback?
Oh yeah, of course. And there's always going to be a little bit of pushback, but the more you talk about it, the more you have to you have to not only say it, you have to show it.
Yeah.
So when we start talking about this, and then the first time that crew leader is faced with a situation and they get support, their leadership actually has their back when they go, "This is unsafe, we're not going to do it." And leadership goes, "You're right. Stop. We're going to find another way." That's when it starts to click. And then there's the lineman telegraph, as we call it. Word spreads quick in the lineman world, and they start talking to each other, and they go, "Well, we had this job the other day, and they actually let us do it safely. They actually told us to stop and wait." So there's always going to be pushback until they see, yeah, this is going to be supported.
Yeah. So you're thinking, like, I'm just trying to think where that pushback comes from, or what's maybe some of the things that people would say the most. Is it that they can't envision that you can still get the job done safely, or is it that they're not going to get that support from leadership, or where do you see that the pushback?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of that, and it's even that you get the guys that I've been doing line work for 30 plus years, and this is the way we've always done it. And that goes down into training. And then we have apprentices come to class and go, my foreman said that I didn't need to know all this, that he could teach me everything I need to know on a job site.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not necessarily, because these are new ways. This is new technology. Things are evolving. Things are changing. When your foreman's foreman was doing line work, they didn't even have material handling bucket trucks. So things have changed, and you have to change with it. But a lot of folks are just resistant to change. Linemen are probably the worst of the worst, being resistant to change, and it's just who we are. And when you start trying to give them new and different ways that's different from what they were taught when they were coming up, there's going to be a little pushback. But eventually, they almost always will buy in.
Nice. So you mentioned that, kind of over the years, you've seen some changes, and hopefully for the better. Do you think, I guess, like, when it comes to company culture, and you've got younger guys coming in, new guys coming up, um, I guess, what are some of those those things that, if someone wanted to take away from this conversation and kind of put in place or try to implement, that you've actually seen work and make change? Like, what are some practical ideas that they could take away?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind, and when I was coming up before I went to Northwest Lineman College in 2022, and that was the first time I had heard about the capacity model, and that came from Quanta. That's a Quanta initiative. And then now that I work for Quanta and I'm in the Southeast region, that is the biggest push. And I've seen it in action. I've seen it work. And you're basically, as a human, we're going to fail. We're going to do something. I wanted to say dumb, but not really dumb. But we're just going to make mistakes every day. We drop things slip out of our hands. We have one of those cloudy days where our brain is just not working right. Well, the capacity model is made to help those catastrophic failures, those things that are life altering or life ending. And it's things like covering up properly, is barricading the truck, staying out of the drop zone. There's a lot of different ways to do it, where when you do fail, it's not life altering or life ending. If something breaks, if something unexpected happens, then you're able to fail safely. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that in action and seen it work. And we track that. We track the successes of that. And it's called sticky. It's I guess the correct way to say it is stuff that'll kill you, but the linemen say the shit that'll kill you. Mm-hmm. But that's what you look for. What's going to kill you? What's going to kill me on this job site? I need to protect myself from that. We care about slips, trips, and falls. We care about cut fingers. We care about all that stuff, but that's not going to change my life if I cut my finger.
Yeah. So just like, how does this work? So you're going to a job, you're maybe doing a safety briefing or something like prior to starting the work, but you're especially focused on those critical kind of life altering hazards or risks. Is that how?
That's it.
So it's just a conversation, and is it like a group conversation, or how does that actually work, I guess?
Yeah, it's you talk about it in your job briefing, and everybody's involved, and you look at the things that'll kill you. We have the energy wheel, that's electrical motion, gravity, all the way around the wheel. Mm-hmm. And we look at that and we go, okay, we're having an electrical hazard here. We're going to be moving energized phases. Okay. If something goes wrong, that can kill me.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are we going to build in to protect us if something goes wrong here? And then we plan the job based on that. And you look at the whole job. And then if something comes up later, it's like, ooh, we didn't catch that. Hey, we get everybody back together. All right, we have this hazard over here, and this is how we're going to protect ourselves if something does happen. And it's a conversation in the job briefing.
Can you think of a time when, and it could have been at your workplace, or it could have been another company that you've heard of, maybe, that, that you feel they didn't treat this as their moral responsibility, and there was a failure, and it was due to that? You got an example of that, or just?
Yeah. So I've been in safety and training for so many years. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've investigated some accidents. I've been around it. And one thing that a lot of linemen overlook, and I had a kind of a conversation through TikTok a few months ago with some young man, and he was on the West Coast, and I was watching the video, and he was climbing a pole. So I stopped on it, and he got up to the secondary, and then he started connecting the service. and he had leather gloves on. And I was thinking, I'm sure it's not energized. And he connected one of the hot legs, and it sparked a little bit. And I was like, oh man, you are doing this hot with leather gloves on. So I went into the comments, and I saw a few comments there, and one of them said, it's just secondary voltage. What's it going to do? And so I wrote back, it can kill you. That's what it'll do. Secondary voltage will kill you. And then kind of had a little bit of back and forth. And finally I said, and they kept going back to, it's not primary voltage. It's not high voltage. And I said, can you name anybody that has been killed with leather glove, or excuse me, killed with secondary voltage with rubber gloves on? Because I can name 5 people that were killed with leather gloves. I can name them. And he wrote back, no, I can't. Like, well, it is a serious hazard that a lot of linemen take for granted because it's just 120 volts.
Mm-hmm.
And as we get that kind of macho attitude, and we go, I can do that. And yeah, you probably can, but one day it may catch up with you. And that kind of goes back to that capacity model. One day you're going to make a mistake. So the capacity for that is you wear rubber gloves. That's your protection.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that quite a few times, and I know some guys that they didn't build that in. And I can name one example where they did build it in. And there was a crew that was working on a pole, and they were lowering a transformer from one bucket truck. They were lowering it down through the phases. They had everything covered up properly. And from end to end, everything was covered up the way it's supposed to. Insulator broke above the guy's head, and he was at the neutral level. And the phase kind of bounced off his shoulder, and it was completely covered, and he was able to control it. No fire, no electrical contacts, nothing. Nothing happened, simply because he had it covered up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like that, the Swiss cheese model, right?
Yeah.
The more layers you put in place. And so it kind of comes back to, like you said, identifying what can kill us.
Right.
And then making sure you got something in place.
That's it.
And, it might be that easy.
Yeah, we call them controls. We build in controls and that's kind of what the things that the part of the job that protects you.
Yeah. When you think about all the incidents maybe that you've ever even come across, and you or read about, or even anything, what do you think in today's day and age, what's the most avoidable injury that's still happening, or fatality? What's the one that you just see and you're like, oh my, we're still doing that?
Electrical contact.
Yeah.
Number one, because I have never, I'm sure there's some outlier cases that have happened where a guy had a contact with his rubber gloves or rubber sleeves on. I've never seen it. I've never investigated it. I've never talked about a specific case. It may be out there, but the vast majority, almost all electrical contacts, involve at least one hand. And then it might be a leg or a foot or a shoulder or whatever, or it could be hand to hand. They just grab two things they think is de-energized because somebody told them, or they think it is, and they grab it without gloves on. That is the most avoidable by far. And so many times I've said, if he would have just put his rubber gloves on, he would still be here today, or he would still have all of his appendages. He would have his arms. But I've never said, if he would have just taken his rubber gloves off, he would have been okay. Never said that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most avoidable by far. And if we're linemen, if we're really linemen, we should be able to do anything with rubber gloves on. That's what kind of separates us from other trades is we
Yeah.
do this stuff with rubber gloves on and we're good at it.
Mm-hmm. It's good. How if there was a company out there that wanted to move from compliance based safety program to a more ethics or morality based program, like what steps would they take? What would you suggest that they think about or do or put in place?
Oh yeah, so the first thing I would do is get the your leaders in a room and sit them down and let them be involved. This is what we're thinking. This is what we would like to do. This is the direction we want to go with safety, the mindset around safety, all of those things. How can we do this and you buy into it and you support it and let them talk? One of the best quotes I think I've ever heard related to training and buy-in. It's an old Ben Franklin quote. It says, "Tell me and I'll forget. Teach me and I might remember. Include me and I'll learn." You have to include them.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just a top-down push, like you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to think about this different, they're going to blow it off. But if you get them in the room and say, okay, this is what we want to do, but we want to hear from you. How do we do it? They'll tell you, and they'll be completely honest with you. So to the point to where you're like, man, that was brutal, but you got to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to hear it, take that in, and then take what they say and build your safety culture based on that. Because everybody wants to go home and everybody wants to do the job. Well, we want to get the lights on, and we don't want it to take 2 hours just to do a simple job. So there's the middle. You got to find the middle, and they'll tell you where that is.
Oh, that's really good. Well, why don't we switch gears a little bit? And you mentioned your involvement on the board, and I guess I'll let you kind of talk about that organization and you guys are moving. I guess why don't you fill us in on that?
Yeah, so it's the International Lineman Museum and the Hall of Fame is kind of around that. I'm on the board of directors for that, and we're trying to move that from Shelby, North Carolina, where it's based now, to Leesburg, Florida. There's the Lineman Ranch that was just purchased. Andy Price is kind of head of that, and he's with American Safety. He's the CEO of American Safety, and he lives down there now. And we just had a board meeting not too long ago, and we're going to be pushing, or not pushing, but we're going to be looking for support for the museum, and we want to bring that down there. There's several buildings. The Fallen Lineman organization is involved in that, and they have their own building, and we're going to have a monument in there. And we want to make it like a walk through time. If you've ever seen the American Lineman book written by Alan Drew, and it kind of starts in the telegraph era, and it goes all the way through time up to current day. And that's what we want to do. The building is really long, so you go in and you just kind of walk, starting in the telegraph, and it's going to be really cool. But kind of keep an eye out for that, and look for ways to support it. And it's going to be amazing. There's nothing else like it in the world, and we want to make that an attraction. There's going to be a venue there where you can do meetings, you can do weddings, you can do a lot of stuff. And if a lineman wants to get married at the ranch, we'll be able to do that. So it'll be really cool, and it'll be all line work based. And it's really something else. If you haven't seen it, you can go on Facebook, Lineman Ranch, and you can kind of check out the progress of that. But
yeah, no, that sounds great. We can put a link in the show notes for that, and people could click on it and find that. And that sounds really, really cool. And
it's going to be awesome.
Fantastic. I guess on that note, is there anything else that you got coming up soon, maybe some speaking engagements, or is it just working on this?
Yeah, so I'm a couple of things. So one is I'm going to be speaking at the Northwest Lyman College graduation in Florida in May. Also in May, you see the guitars behind me. So music is another part of my passion in my life. I'm going to be taking my band to the Gaff and Go Rodeo. I think it's May 19th,
Mm-hmm.
16th or 19th. Kind of date just lost it. So check that, look it up. It's online, but I'm going to be taking the band down there. They're doing a Friday night reception, have the band play for a few hours and just have a good time. So, that's coming up, and, a few other speaking engagements coming along. I'm going to try to be at the IP conference in the fall and just kind of roll from there. Otherwise it's just rolling through training.
Awesome. No, I mean, I mean, we can link to all that in the show notes. And I want to thank you again for coming on the show. It's great, great conversation, some great insights there, and definitely something for people to check out.
Great. Glad to be here. Thank you, John.